3 years ago, I was looking at the local job classifieds online when one of the ads caught my eye, not because of what it said, but because it said so little. Best I remember, the ad just read, "Job available, good pay, no benefits, discretion required." It then listed an email address, and that was all. At the time, I was managing a music store, but I had already started hearing rumors we would be shutting down within the next year, and the likelihood of a transfer to another store was slim. I had been morosely looking at job listings for the last few days, but this was the first one that stood out, if only because I was bored and it was weird. So I sent an email. Half an hour later, I had a response telling me to go to a particular office building in an upscale part of the city at a precise time for my screening. I went, and after waiting for a few minutes in the lobby, I was taken into an office where I was given a series of forms and questionnaires to fill out. They collected them and told me they would be in touch. I had almost forgotten about the whole thing until a month later, I got a call saying I had moved on to the second stage of the hiring process. I was again given an address and time, and when I arrived, this time it was a different nice office park 20 miles away from the first one. I was met by a man who introduced himself as Mr. Solomon. He escorted me into a large room that contained a chair and a desk. On the desk were 2 large monitors, a keyboard and mouse, and a bolted-down metal box with 2 oversized buttons on it, one red and one green. He told me this room was a model for the place I would be working if I took the job. He described the job as follows. I would be working 7 shifts of 6 hours every week. My job would be simple. I would arrive at work 10 minutes early and enter an outer area that was like a locker room. I would have my own personal locker. I would store all belongings in the locker and change into the provided work clothes. I was never, under any circumstances, to carry any item of my own into the surveillance room. I was never, under any circumstances, to take any item with me from the surveillance room. As for what I was to do in the surveillance room, I was told that the monitor on the left would constantly show a live stream from a high-definition camera in a remote location. My job was simply to watch the camera. Once an hour, I would get onto the computer, attached to the right monitor, and enter a brief log describing anything interesting that occurred in the last hour. I would have no pens or pencils or paper, and I should never try to take any kind of written notes about the work. As for the red and green buttons, the red button was only to be used if there was an emergency. This meant something on the video or in my workspace that required outside help. The green button was to be hit if I saw something on the video feed that was particularly noteworthy. It would tell other people somewhere that, at least in my opinion, something interesting was going on. Solomon stressed that while I was given discretion on when to use this button, I should err on the side of only using it if and when something of real significance occurred. He pointed out the camera on the ceiling of the room we were in. He said the real room would be the same. My work would be observed, and other people were watching the room on the video feed as well. He said I was only a redundancy in case other systems failed. He then smirked and asked if I knew what he meant by redundancy. I nodded, trying not to show my irritation. I don't talk that good to people, so sometimes they think I'm dumb. That's okay. Let him think that if he paid me good enough. The pay was very good, $35 an hour. This worried me. I was already thinking this was some kind of psych experiment or secret government job, which I was okay with. But that kind of money to sit and watch a screen. My mom always told me that if something seems too good to be true, it probably is. And this was seeming too good to be true. I asked if I was going to be doing anything illegal. Solomon laughed and said no. I asked if anyone was going to get hurt. Again, he shook his head no. He said the reason they were paying so much was because they needed employees that were motivated to be professional and discreet. The work they were doing was important, and for various reasons it couldn't be discussed. If I took the job, I would have to sign papers promising I would never discuss my work there, or I could be sued or locked up. I'm only breaking that now because of everything that's happened. So I took the job, and because they wanted me to start right away, I had to quit the store with no notice. I felt bad about that, but I was excited about the new job too. It was a lot of money and seemed like easy enough work, if a bit boring. I was nervous that there was something more to it, but I told myself I would just have to see. No point in chickening out and wasting a good chance because I let my imagination go crazy. I was given the location of the job itself, and when I went there, I was amazed that it really was just like the model room I had been shown with only a few differences. There was a locker room you had to pass through to enter the surveillance room, and there was a small bathroom attached to the real surveillance room also. The real room had a small water cooler in the corner, But because I wasn't allowed to bring anything in with me, I had to eat before or after every shift. The biggest difference, of course, was that the monitors were turned on. The right monitor was just a black and white terminal like you see in movies sometimes. I could type in my logs, but no internet to look at or anything like that. The left monitor, it was video from a room. You would call it a bedroom, I guess, because it had a bed in it, but it had lots of other stuff too. A TV, a sofa and chairs, a couple of tables, and plenty of empty space in between. The camera must be high up in a corner, because I could see pretty much everything except for the far sides of furniture. At first, though, I didn't notice any of that stuff. All I saw was her. She looked to be a little older than me and was very pretty. When I first saw her, she was laying on her side on the sofa. That was the part of the room farthest from the camera, but the picture was very clear, and I could tell that she was sleeping. I found myself leaning into the monitor more so I could see her better, and then I thought about what I was doing and felt embarrassed. It's like I was spying on her. A peeping Tom, my mom used to call it. I didn't want to be a peeping Tom, but I didn't want to be silly either. I needed to think about it slow. It was a good job, and I wasn't doing anything wrong, right? I wasn't hurting anybody. The woman looked fine, and the room was nice. She probably agreed to be there, and it's all some experiment or something. I was just overreacting, so I sat down in the chair and began my work. It didn't take long before I understood more. The woman I took to calling her Rachel wasn't there of her free will. I never saw her hurt, but it was clear that she never left that room, except to go into what I think is a bathroom area that my camera couldn't see. Well, she never left the room on her own. Periodically, usually a couple of times a week during my shifts, men and women in strange-looking outfits would come in and take her from the room. Sometimes she would struggle, but usually she would just go along with her head hung low. They would always bring her back, though the times when she wasn't brought back during my shift were always the worst for me. I would worry about her until I got to work the next day and saw her in the room watching TV or painting. She never looked hurt or even that upset, except for when they took her. And even when she fought, they were always gentle with her. Still, I knew something was wrong. I considered quitting the job, or hitting the red button and getting someone to come so I could get some answers, or calling the police and showing them what the camera was showing me. Except I was scared. Scared of losing my job, and scared of what these people might do to me if I quit or told on them. Solomon had told me when I took the job that part of being discreet was not asking questions. I would never be asked to do more than I had already been told, but I could never tell anyone what I did or saw, and I could never ask questions about what I was doing or why. So I made excuses. It was all an experiment. She was crazy or sick, and they were trying to help her. She was doing a job just like I was. Or if she really was a prisoner somewhere, at least I was watching to make sure that she was okay. If they ever tried to hurt her or I saw that she really didn't want to be there for sure, I could get help then. In a way, I told myself I was helping to protect her by watching. I don't expect you to think much of my excuses. I don't think much of them myself, especially now. But in my defense, when things changed, I didn't ignore it or try to explain it away. I knew something had to be done. Rachel would usually paint for an hour or two every day, and it seemed to always be during my afternoon shifts. The room had no windows as far as I could tell, but I guess she either used a clock or her own body's time to keep to a kind of schedule. I always liked to watch her paint. The thing she was painting was always facing the wrong way for me to see it, but I could see her face as she worked. She always looked peaceful and happy when she was painting, and seeing her that way, smiling serenely from time to time as she got something the way she wanted it, always made my day. I first noticed something was wrong when she started painting more frequently a few weeks ago. Her expression was more focused and serious, and there was a tension to her movements that I wasn't used to seeing. At first I thought she was just really trying to work hard on something, and I wanted to tell her not to worry. Every few weeks, the others would come in and take the old paintings out anyway, bringing in a new stack of, I think the word is canvas, but it was more than her being focused. Something was wrong. She didn't look happy, and she was going for hours at a time. In the span of 3 days, she had finished 4 paintings. I had been growing more and more worried watching her work, and when she finished the 4th, I found myself telling her to just stop and rest a while. I had grown accustomed to talking to the monitor, talking to her in my own way, but she didn't stop. Instead, she began moving the paintings, arranging them on the back and seat of the long sofa at the far end of the room. This was the first time I had gotten to see any of the paintings. Even when the others were taking them out, they always seemed to be turned away from the camera. I was still worried about her, but I was also happy to finally see something she had worked on. happy and amazed. They were beautiful. One was a beautiful green forest, another was an old stone well, a third was a house sitting alone on a small island. The last was an old-fashioned looking movie theater. All of them looked like something out of a dream, with trailing lines of color mixing in the air around them like leaves caught in a wind. It was only when I looked close that I realized the lines of color weren't random. They were words, easy to miss if you weren't looking close, and by themselves, they didn't seem to mean much. Just the ghost of a word somewhere in each of the paintings, easy to lose in everything else that was being shown. I leaned into the monitor and squinted, trying to read the words. Then my heart started thudding as I made them out. Blinking and rubbing my eyes, I looked again, reading them out loud in order. Left to right, top pair then bottom. Please, help, me, Thomas. I pushed back from the monitor, my hand over my mouth. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how any of this could be happening. It wasn't just that she was asking for help, though that was a big part of it. It was that my name is Thomas. I work in security at Disney World, the happiest place on earth. Typically, I wouldn't say where I work, as obviously there are some pretty strict rules about things employees can put online, but I just don't think I can tell this properly without that context. And honestly, I think this may be it for me anyway with this job. I just can't see myself working here any longer now. I've been with the company for 23 years. The first 20 years I worked in the parks, nabbing shoplifters and rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Occasionally there'd be a fight to break up, but people usually kept it pretty mild. The heat and walking was getting too much for me the last few years, so I asked to be transferred somewhere with AC, and the company moved me to one of their resorts. While the working conditions were 110% better as far as climate and comfort go, the guest issues were trickier, mainly domestics. I guess the expensive and stress of vacation got to a lot of people, and I'd be called by neighboring rooms because some mom and dad were yelling at each other. I'd try to suggest they take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit, and that would usually calm them down. But none of that is what I'm here for. I've got to get this out while I have time. 3 days ago, I got a call from management. Apparently, a couple of days before that, housekeeping had went into a room that should have been turned over that day. Turned over is when one guest leaves by about 11 a.m. and the next guest checks in around 3 p.m. And all of the guests' items were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on. But during the next 2 days, when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to check it out, and sure enough, there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, some toys, everything a family would need for vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was for a family, dad, mom, 2 little kids. I tried to call the phone numbers they had given, but all I got was voicemail. We were a bit stumped, so I made the call that housekeeper could clean the room and take the family's personal items to be held until we got in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family had arrived 5 days before. Housekeeping discovered all of their stuff. I found that the family had paid a parking fee, and their vehicle description was listed. A quick walk of the parking lots, and I had easily located their vehicle. So that ruled out a car accident, or them deciding to just leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they had bought a dining plan. This is when a guest prepays for all of their food. They're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits, and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day they arrived, they got here late and probably just stayed on the resort. The next day, they used 2 credits at Epcot. The second park day, they used just 1 credit at Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. Now at Disney, we have something called Magic Bands. Magic Bands are worn by the guests and act as a room key, park ticket, credit card, dining reservation payment, Fast Pass, a system used to bypass lines, and more. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's Fast Pass history. The day they went to Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, and then rode their last ride, It's a Small World, around 11 a.m. Then nothing. Finally, it was time to bring in someone else on this. I called an old coworker at Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull security footage for It's a Small World at the time they rode it. And I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught. Looking, he showed me what he found. There's usually a camera in the direction of where rides load and unload. The footage showed them scanning their bands to use fast passes for the ride and boarding the ride. The footage from the exit of the ride just showed the other people in their car exiting. They weren't there. Of course, we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and Mom and Dad and the other kid got off in the middle of the ride to help, and they all got injured or killed or stuck in machinery somewhere. So we shut down the ride, middle of the damn day, turned off that earworm music and turned up the lights. Me and my buddy walked that ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually, there was close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find shit except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I was right stumped. I've kept digging the past couple of days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I found next to. I've called the police, and I suppose they're on the way, but the company has a way of covering up things like this, and I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some type of warning. I kept digging into their reservation over the last couple of days, and today I noticed they had purchased Memory Maker. There are photographers all over the parks and cameras in a lot of the rides, and with Memory Maker, the photos are all free. They automatically get added to a guest's Disney account when the system knows their picture has been taken. And the system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with the magic bands. Well, I opened up their Memory Maker photo album, and I swear, there's 732 pictures. The first 30 or so are pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides in front of the castle. But the rest are all in It's a Small World. The rides only take 1 picture per go-around. So it appears as though this family has ridden this ride over 700 times. The first picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty except for this little family, and they look so darn confused. The next 10 to 15, I can see Dad getting angry, yelling. Mom is holding on to those 2 kids like her life depends on it, and you can see the kids getting increasingly upset, crying, and it goes on and on and on. After 50 or so, it looks like they're trying to get out. In one, the dad is missing. In another, they're all gone. Maybe like they've bailed early in the ride and tried to walk out, but in the very next one, they're all right back in that damn car. After around 450 or so, I only see the mom and kids. It's just when I look closely I can see Dad, maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Since about 6 at 75, there's just Mom and 1 kid. Another body in another seat. The mom and kid aren't moving anymore. I think them 2 are still alive, just damn near catatonic. Looking straight ahead, pale, and y'all, I swear on my fucking life, the dolls are moving or something. In some of these pictures, I can tell they aren't where they should be. I even saw one with a doll in the car with this family. I can't look anymore or I'm gonna lose my lunch. I closed the album. Its file size has increased since I closed it. God, are there new pictures being added? I see on security cameras that the local PD just arrived, so they'll take over soon. I wish I knew what the fuck is going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed in my lap. I don't think I'll be able to update this. After I talk to the police, I think I'm gonna walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there before Disney feeds the media some bullshit cover-up as to why a whole family vanished. They didn't vanish. I know where they are. Hello everyone, my name is James, and I'm 28 years old. I've been wanting to tell this story for a long time, to get rid of this feeling on my chest, and so that I'll finally be able to sleep again. Ever since then, I've been getting nightmares, and no amount of therapy is helping the severe amount of trauma I gained working at Walmart. Okay, let's go to the beginning. It was around June of 2023. I'm not going to get much into the details, but I was jobless, broke, and in desperate need of money. If I didn't get a job, I would most likely lose my house, and that was the last thing I needed to happen. The sun was late into setting, and I was walking back home through the dimly lit streets. Not too long before I would make it back my home. But then, as I was walking, I walked past a poster which I was just barely able to read the word job in my peripheral vision. But now I wish that I did end up walking past it. I picked up the poster from the telephone pole it was attached to. In bold and red letters, it said, "Looking for valuable and passionate workers to man the security job. Great pay, low hours, and health insurance." When I looked down at the bottom corner of the page, I couldn't help but get suspicious when I read the word Walmart. Walmart and free healthcare? That was obviously a lie. Now, even though I was suspect of the poster, I was in grave need of money. So of course, I subconsciously decided to take the job, which was if they hired me. One strange thing I did notice though, is that the address next to the phone number wasn't the Walmart, about a couple of blocks down from where I was currently standing. But the address was for a Walmart 10 miles away from where I was just standing. Nevertheless, I would have to find a way, as I had already made up my mind on taking up the job. I would have to buy a bicycle, because there was no way I was walking about 13 miles from home. Fortunately for me, I do remember having an electric scooter that's just been sitting down in my basement, If I'm lucky, I could be able to get it to work again. I folded the poster up and placed it in my pocket, continuing on my way home. As soon as I got home, I was confronted by my dog Shanks and the poor condition of my home. I named him Shanks based off of a character from one of my favorite shows. Without my dog, I'm not sure I would still be around to this day. My dog leaped onto my leg, barking and wagging his tail excitedly. I couldn't help but gain a wide smile as I crouched down to pet him profusely. After I was done petting Shanks, I walked past him and entered my basement. I flipped the light on the side of me, turning on the basement light. The light flickered and buzzed erratically, submerging me in darkness, if only for moments. I looked over to the other side of the basement, seeing my old electric scooter sitting in the corner. It had taken quite a beating over these years down here, sitting in the basement. I grabbed the electric scooter, wiping away dust and webs from it. I checked the battery, and it surprisingly wasn't dead. It was pretty much storing all the energy it had from when I last charged it. Now I just needed to see if it actually worked. Lo and behold, it could actually move. Of course, there are some things, such as the wheel not turning properly when the handle is moved. But at least it still worked. I finally contacted the number on the poster, which I was then put in hold for a couple of minutes. When they put me back on the line, they told me to introduce myself, which I did. Afterwards, they began asking me really obscure and weird questions, such as, what's your favorite color? Do you have frequent nightmares? And are you prone to auditory and visual hallucinations? I didn't understand why they were asking these questions. I had to second check if I called the right number. It was at this point that I began recording the call just in case. After I had answered all those questions, it led me to an automated voice message that was supposed to explain the terms and conditions of the job I had to accept if I wanted. However, the voice at times were either too fast or unintelligible, making it so I couldn't understand anything of what they just said. It then told me to press 1 if I agreed to whatever jumbo it said. I didn't have much of a choice then, so of course I pressed 1. Afterwards, the phone abruptly hung up, sending me back to my home screen. Soon after, I got a message by an unknown number. It was as read, "Congratulations on getting the security job. Please refer to the location on the poster. See you at 11 tomorrow." I was really skeptical of the message. That felt way too easy, but I brushed it off as them being desperate for a security worker. The next day I woke up around 9:30. I stayed up and sleep-deprived myself so I could wake up and make it there on time. I rode my scooter over to the address on the poster. After about an hour and 30 minutes, I found myself in the parking lot of Walmart. The parking lot was barren. There were almost no cars in sight. As I walked in, I was immediately greeted by a woman in a suit. She smiled widely from cheek to cheek, but it didn't feel like a real smile. How happy can you be working at Walmart? It was extremely unsettling. "Hey, you must be here for the security job." Yes, I responded, slightly confused. "Great, then follow me." I followed the woman in the suit further into the building, eventually finding myself in the back of the Walmart. She then introduced me to someone named Carson, who would tell me everything about the job and what to do. However, I only got to see him one time that day, before getting thrown into the shift blind. Oh, so fortunate for me, the company forces coworkers to exchange numbers with each other. Since I'm security, I only had to give my number to Carson. Now on to why I've made this in the first place. It had hit 12 on the clock. I finally settled in and was wearing the usual black security jacket with security written on it. It was 11, and it was only 10 minutes into my shift until I realized something strange. I couldn't seem to find a security office, those rooms with cameras. Well, I wouldn't know about this later until I was informed that there was, in fact, no security office. As if I wasn't already feeling uneasy, I was basically dawdling about in the open expanse of Walmart, alone. The lights were still on for some reason, so my ears was constantly showered with the humming and buzzing of lights. Did I mention the extreme cold? Oh God, it was so cold in there. I could see the smoke leaving my mouth clearly. I eventually ended up walking around through the aisles wrapped in a giant blanket like a little kid. Around 11:30, Carson called me unexpectedly. I answered the call, first clearing my throat to speak properly. "Hello?" I didn't get a response for a couple of seconds before I heard Carson's voice on the other side of the phone. "Oh, hey. Okay, so I'm here to tell you what to do and what not." The tone in his voice when he said was nonchalant, almost like he couldn't care or was too bothered to make the call. "You should know the basics of security. I mean, you have watched Mall Cop, right?" "Yeah, but before I could finish my sentence, he cut me off." "Good. So don't let anyone in. That's the basic gist of your job. At 12, make sure to lock the front doors. Don't worry about any other unlocked doors. They will resolve themselves. Also, keep in mind that the lights doesn't actually turn off until around 2, so you have plenty of time. Oh yeah, if you see any strange figures walking around in the store, then just ignore them. I don't quite understand it either, but those are people just practicing night vision tech. I remember the manager saying something about a contract, but that's about all I know. Then without warning, he just hung up. I wanted to ask him more questions, especially about the strange figures, seeing as he kind of brushed them off like it was normal. The contract part too was skeptical to me. Why is Walmart having contracts with military or whatever? What the hell is this company? I could remember mumbling to myself. The time was now 12, and I swiftly walked over to the front doors and locked them. It was just as he said, the lights hadn't turned off yet. And with nothing to do, of course, I resorted to walking around the store. There was an entire section with laptops and games I could play. Unfortunately, the consoles were locked and couldn't be accessed without a key, unlike the laptops. Occasionally, I would go over there to play games on a laptop if I got bored. Eventually, I got hungry, so I ransacked some snacks off of the shelves. I thought that surely they wouldn't care, right? Then the snacks started to become temporary, and my body was aching for actual food now. Fortunately, I could grab a microwave and hook it up to an outlet to eat up any microwavable frozen food I could find in the freezer, like Jamaican beef patties or occasionally ramen noodles. Also, I should mention that I was able to use my phone to screencast movies on one of the display televisions. It only worked for that Sony TV for some reason. The time was now 1:30, and I was comfortably cozy, laying on a king-sized bed, fully adorned with a blanket too. I watched movies on my phone while I wait for the clock to hit 2. The movie I was watching was Inception, an all-time favorite movie of mine. It's not a detail you needed to know, but I felt like sharing it anyways. And then it finally hit 2. As soon as it hit 2, all the lights turned off simultaneously, including my phone that restarted entirely. Additionally, as this was happening, I started hearing random loud whirring and humming noises from the front doors, accompanied by bright flashing lights of random colors. Then it all abruptly stopped. I turned on my phone and looked at the time. It was completely wrong. The time was 20:06, which I'm sure was impossible unless my phone had restarted and been default set for 24-hour time. And I brushed it off as just that. I tried to continue watching my movie in peace, but my phone didn't work, connected to the building Wi-Fi or using data. I got up from the comforts of my bed and went to check the laptops and TVs. And as you could expect, those were also disabled or not functioning properly. In fact, the Sony TV from before was the only TV to actually even turn on. As I was inspecting the electronics to make sure it just wasn't one section, I suddenly spot a strange figure walking around in the darkness. With a closer look, I could see that the figure was wearing some gear, and I subconsciously noted that these were the night vision PPL that Carson was talking about. Despite specifically remembering him telling me not to approach them, I did the opposite against my ever-growing curiosity. I walked up behind the figure, tapping him on the shoulder. The figure turned around, letting out a little grunt in confusion. "Hi," I tried to greet them. They responded with nothing but silence for a couple of seconds before actually speaking. "Sorry, I'm just so confused. I've never seen a person in here before. Something was wrong with their voice. It sounded echoey, but at the same time it didn't. I know there was something wrong, but at the same time it felt like I was viewing something at the wrong angle. I don't know how to explain it. I was trying to understand what the figure was, but my brain and body was simultaneously confused. It was incomprehensible. "You mean there weren't any other security guards?" I asked them. The static sound signaling one of the TVs turning on caused me to turn around and look at it. And when I turned back around, the figure was gone. My heart dropped in my chest. It was a fear I haven't had in a long time. Back from all the way when I was 6, and I saw a man standing over my unconscious body. I hadn't felt so alone in a Walmart. It felt like I was being suffocated by the silent ambience of the Walmart. I quickly ran to the back of the Walmart, locking myself in a room and crouching down in one of the corners in complete and utter terror. After God knows long of whimpering, "I'm the corner," I grew some balls and stood up, taking a deep breath to compose myself and calm my shaking body. I flipped on the light of the room I was in, which means that the power doesn't get cut off at 2, like the lights. With the lights on, I could see the things inside the room. The room had boxes of tapes and even its own VCR. It felt reminiscent of the videotape room I'd occasionally go to back at school. As I browsed through the videotapes, one specifically caught my eye. A tape named Security Training. It seemed to be a videotape meant to train new security guards on what to do and what not to do. But it must have been never used, or haven't been used since something happened. It's most likely why they have real people train you instead. Anyways, I grabbed the tape and threw it into the VCR, sitting down as it booted up. Once it fully booted up, I was greeted by a blank blue screen with a jam playing in the background. It was like one of those upbeat jams that you'd heard in 1999, 2000s advertisements trying to be hip with the kids, except that the music was out of tune and there would be missing notes. It was unnerving. Then, this yellow smiley face appeared on the screen, smiling from cheek to cheek. For simplicity, I'm going to call it Smiley. After Smiley appeared on the screen, a robotic voice could be heard accompanied with yellow text on the bottom. "Hello. Welcome to the first day on the job." Its voice suddenly was bleeped out as it presumed to say a name I couldn't recognize. Here at Walmart, many customers rely on us to buy through us necessities and entertainment. You only have 3 things to do while on the security job. Smiley disappeared from the screen afterwards, and the blue background switched to a still image of an empty Walmart. Soon afterwards, a stickman appeared on screen, wearing a hat labeled Security Number 1. After locking the doors at 12, do not let anyone inside the building under any circumstances. If there is anyone in the building after you lock the doors, then do not let them leave under any circumstances. Another stickman came into appearance, being colored purple in order to separate itself from the original black stickman. Number 2, do not approach the figures walking around the store after 2. They will have gear on them. Specifically, night goggles will be the most noticeable. They do not know you are there. You will frighten them. This is what Carson was talking about, but I had forgotten about the detail of the night goggles for some reason. It's a detail I'm sure that I wouldn't forget. The scene switched, now showing a still image of a room with a row of monitors sitting on a desk. Number 3, keep your eyes on the camera for any suspicious activity. If you see something you deem as suspicious, then mark it down on a note for higher-ups review. This tape had to be quite old, as there wasn't a security room to watch the cameras from, or the fact that there weren't even any cameras here to begin with. It makes sense as things changed. The tape became redundant and outdated information. Number 4, I thought there were only 3 things we had to do. The videotape didn't stop for my train of thought, however, and continued. The screen turned pitch black, showing Smiley once again, except his bright big smile was now gone. In fact, he didn't even have a mouth anymore, as he just stared directly through the screen. It was staring at me. The voice and music was gone, only leaving me with the yellow text below. "Hide, we know where you are, James." My heart dropped in my chest as my mind recognized what the videotape was saying. I swiftly turned the VCR off and stood up to also turn the light off. I crouched down in the corner of the room, holding my breath and closing my eyes tight in terror. I could feel the tears beginning to well up in my eyes. The only thing I could think about was my dog Shanks and how much I missed him right now. After a couple of minutes of sobbing and shaking uncontrollably, I could hear the sound of a dog barking echoing throughout the building. I listened attentively, noticing that the barking was coming from one of the aisles close to me. Then suddenly, I hear the back doors swing wide open with a loud bang. I feared the worst, as I could hear footsteps approaching the room I was in. Then silence. I held my breath in anticipation, my heart beating out of my chest. Then something happened, but it wasn't what I expected. A husky burst through the door, barking at me. It still gave me quite a fright, but was nowhere near as bad as what I was thinking. The husky walked up to me, laying down on my lap. It reminded me of Shanks and brought me my much-needed comfort that I didn't even think about how the husky got inside. I checked the phone on my time, which wasn't even numbers now. I began petting the husky, finding some joy in this alone and cold building. I couldn't help but feel like falling asleep, and without knowing, I ended up dozing off. I woke up the next morning in the same room, but the husky was gone. Additionally, all those videotapes were gone, including the VCR. I stood up, wiping some saliva off my mouth. I checked the time. It was now 7:30. I exited the back rooms of Walmart and went to the front doors. I looked out through the doors and had never been so happy feeling the sun on my skin. I could see some cars start to pull up. Specifically, the only one I could actually recognize was Carson, who had gotten out of his car first. I swiftly unlocked the front doors, walking out to greet him. My body was still slightly shaking as I walked towards him, and I felt pale in many places. As I came face to face with Carson, I couldn't control myself and hugged him tightly. It was pathetic, really, but I had never felt so alone and scared. It felt like I was a kid all over again. "Wah, are you okay, man?" he said, gently pushing me away. I wiped away some tears welling in my eyes before turning back towards Carson. "Yeah, I'm fine," I replied, composing myself. "Good, because you're pale." I chuckled slightly before getting serious again. "Carson, listen, can we talk about something?" Carson quickly turned back towards me, his eyebrows furrowing. He grabbed my arm, pulling me closer so I could hear what he would say. Not here. You have my phone number, right? Then call me once you get home. I nodded as he let me go. He walked into the Walmart, leaving me to stand outside the building alone. Unfortunately, I have to go somewhere, like right now. When I see you again, I'll gather up the recordings I've created so far and publish them.